The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 41.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Thank you for joining us on the EL. Today we have
Nadyas,
author of Overfished Ocean Strategy. Welcome, Nadia, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
My pleasure.
Will you take just a moment to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about you personally?
Sure. So my name is Nadyas Aksimbaeva. I live in multiple worlds and wear a few different hats. On one side, I'm a business owner, and it happened to be that within our group of businesses, one of the businesses is consulting, which is the one that I curate most closely. So that leads me to a consulting world. It's a wonderful experience to work with many different companies and many different industries and sizes and geographies. And then connected to that, my other realities, which is being an academic. I do have a position in Slovene business school, but I also teach in other business schools around the world, primarily to executives. I've been working in executive education since 2006 nonstop. So it's a nice connection. I can work in business and then in my academic life reflect on what has been happening for me and other people I look at through my consulting world, and then teach and share those ideas with others.
Nadia, thank you for sharing that. And let's jump right into your book, Overfished Ocean Strategy, which was just made available for purchase on June 2nd, 2014. And we're going to move fairly quickly, but really we're going to cover the top questions that our listener/reader would really like to get answered. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing Overfished Ocean Strategy?
Sure. The book is, as always with me, an accident. I've been researching an interesting pattern that I noticed among my friends, my colleagues, and my customers in consulting business, which was a new wave of innovative business models and strategies for companies trying to deal with resource depletion. And I was trying to understand what makes companies enter this new domain, and those who do pioneer in this approach, what makes their path successful. So that was a kind of accidental research, and a few publishers asked me if I would be considering writing a book on the topic, and the book came out of that dialogue.
So what makes your book different from others regarding the same topic?
I'm not sure if it's different or not. The exciting part for me was to create an experience rather than a book. And when I got the reviews, as my publisher, Barrett Kohler, requires third-party reviews from different people in the industry, one of the reviewers' words really made me smile, that this is an experience, not just a book. My hope was to help business owners, managers, executives, students of business, to have a conversation and sense-making around this idea of disappearing resource-based and how can we not only survive, but thrive in that market reality.
That audience that you just talked about, how would you want them to engage with your book? Would you want them to start at the beginning and read straight through? Or is this more of a book where they can jump in and jump out, utilizing different resources within your book?
I would say that the entrance point into the book is still with the first two chapters that kind of lay the foundation, a lot of facts about what's going on in the economy that is, generally speaking, is not widely discussed. The stories I hear in media and stories I hear in the boardroom are such. This is a crisis or post-crisis era, but soon we will come back to business as usual. And what I'm trying to show and speak about in this book is that there's a deeper transformation going on. So there is no business as usual anymore. So I would enter with the first chapter, or at least first two chapters. And after that, it's all about principles of innovation. There's no sequence. You can enter and exit wherever you find interesting, whatever draws you.
Nadia, this next part of the interview is not only my favorite, but I believe it's the most important part. And that's where we really just hand over the mic to you and allow you to completely take us through your creation or your baby. Really give our listener / reader a great explanation of what they can expect when they pick up your book.
Sure. So I appreciate that. Let me try to be concise, but at the same time, as deep as I can, describing the story of this book or the kind of storyline. So, as a business owner, but also as an academic, I've been trying to understand what's going on in the last 5 to 7 years with the global economy, and how do I personally prepare my own company and my customers' companies for what is ahead. And as I mentioned before, the stories in the media, the stories in the business is that we will come out of recession and then everything will be all right. What I notice, however, is that very few people are talking about a much deeper thing that is going on in our economy, and that is the disappearing resource base. Let me just give you a few examples. So in the 20th century, the 100 years behind us, we have seen a really huge increase in the use of our resources. Specifically, in this era, our population quadrupled, our economic output went up about 20 times, and the demand for different resources jumped between 600 and 2,000%. That's the recent McKinsey's data. But surprising thing is that what macroeconomics has taught us for ages, when the demand for resources or for demand for a product goes up, so does the price. That didn't happen in the 20th century. Actually, throughout the 20th century, the price for key resources kept falling and falling. And if we measure them by any of the commodities indexes, they fell by almost half in real terms. So we live in this illusion that we can keep increasing the production, growing our business, using more and more resources, and the prices will keep falling and falling because they've done just that for 100 years. But the reality is that the sweet times of using and abusing resources is over, because we already see huge jumps in the prices. In the first 100 years, in the last 100 years, we've been looking at the decrease. Already in the first 10 years of this century, we had 147% jump in resources. So the story of the book is really about how do businesses understand this reality, as we're not only talking about the usual suspects, the oil and gas and other resources related to energy, but really across any resource that you can imagine, whether it's nutrition, now food, the agriculture products, any type of metal, any type of mineral, anything we get out of the earth, and of course the fish and other resources of the ocean. The question is, what do we do about it? So what I was happy to discover is that there are a number of companies that are really taking this challenge as an opportunity to drive innovation and strategic realignment in a really drastic way. And these companies, when you look at them across industries, across sizes, across geographies, they have something in common. So the book takes you through 5 things that I've been able to find that really are similar between these companies. These are the different principles of innovation that really separates these pioneers from the mainstream business. So what are those principles? Principle number 1 is moving from linear economy to circular economy, moving from line to circle. This is really about the stories that have been showing up from time to time in different media or in different scientific research, but hasn't been taken mainstream. Today, circular economy is finally going mainstream. And this is building on the wisdom of nature. Nature doesn't have linear economy. At the end of a line, if we take the traditional linear economy, we mine something or we grow something, take something out of the earth, we use it barely once, and we trash it at the end of the year or at the end of the use. Nature doesn't do that. Nature has a cyclical economy. So when I die, my body, being a precious resource for nature, is being decomposed by millions and millions of microorganisms who make out of that important components for soil, which then grows into a beautiful vegetable or flower, which then feeds different animals and then ends up being another human again. So the cyclical nature is what many companies such as Shaw Industries, which is a carpet manufacturer, or Mud Jeans, which is a jeans and apparel manufacturer, are using and really successfully protecting its own ability to compete while at the same time distinguishing itself from its competitors. So that's principle number one, from line to circle. The second principle is a little bit more difficult to comprehend for many customers I talk to, but there are few, especially in the energy industry, who immediately got it. So this is about moving away from a very narrow focus to entering a much wider focus when we're searching for a new competitive advantage. Most of the time, we are taught to look really nearby to our customers, our competition, our suppliers, for ideas for new competitive advantage. If we want to put out something new on the market, we look around. What do our customers want? What do our competitors have in their ovens? What do our suppliers develop that we can use? But the surprising thing is that the pioneers of Overfished Ocean Strategy don't look nearby. They actually expand their horizon and move away from their immediate nearby community and go far away in their supply chain. So all the way up to the supplier of the supplier of the supplier of the supplier, or all the way downstream to the customer of the customer of the customer, and discover really unique sources of competitive advantage there. So the second principle speaks about not only the vertical orientation and vertical integration, but horizontal, and that's why the name of the principle is moving away from vertical to horizontal. The third principle in the book speaks about new sources of growth. So if you take traditional companies, the growth comes from selling more things to more people. That's where we usually have growth. Let's sell more to more. And when we talk about resource depletion, it's very simple. We cannot sell more to more if we run out of raw materials. So how do we deal with that? And what I see is that the pioneering companies try to look at the product or service they provide, not from the traditional perspective, but from perspective of value. Let me illustrate that. When we ask customers, or when I ask my audience usually, have you ever heard of a company, Rolls-Royce? Of course, most people heard of this brand. It's a very famous brand. And when you ask them, what does Rolls-Royce produce? Some would say cars. Of course, many know that the majority of business for this company comes from airplane engines. And if you think of airplane engines, this is as brick and mortar, or in this case, metal, as of a product as you can imagine. This is very real product, real economy, and it's definitely not a service. Yet, if you look at the composition of the earnings of Rolls-Royce, you will see that today the company makes more money as a service company than it is as a product company. How does it do it? Instead of selling airplane engines, Rolls-Royce sells hour of flight. And if you think about that, shift from product to end value is a huge change in the business model, but it's also an opportunity to make sure the company is able to control its precious raw materials, its resources, and take the airplane engine back at the end of a life cycle and be able to remanufacture it into new airplane engine. So it's not only better for the customer, the airline, that is able to control its cash flow much better this way, but it's also much better for the Rolls-Royce, as it's able to provide better service and also control its resource base. So that's principle 3, growth to growth. The last 2 principles of the book, and I will not speak about them in depth, are taking away its attention away from the external orientation to internal orientation. So the first 3 principles are all about how should a company look out there and create new sources of competitive advantage. But the internal principles, the plan to model and department to mindset, speak really about how should we organize inside the company. What do we need to do to prepare ourselves for a resource depleted world? And how do companies change their ability to compete from the perspective of the reorganization, from perspective of culture, communication, and people. So that would be a kind of quick walkthrough through the logic of the book.
Nadia, that was an excellent walkthrough, and you went through a ton of great content. And that leads me to my next question, which is if you're the reader can only take away one concept or principle or action item from your entire book, what would you want that to be?
Well, I would probably summarize it in a very simple way. If your company doesn't have a strategy to deal with the resource depleted world, it's time to develop one. That's it. We have come to an end of the time where we have unlimited growth opportunity. There will never be a chance to grow the way we grew before. There's a different growth pattern, but for that, you need to understand the resource depleted world and prepare a strategy for dealing with it.
So Nadia, our audience loves quotes. Do you have a favorite quote that you wrote in your book? And if you don't have one, do you have one that maybe has resonated well with your readers?
I have a favorite quote that is not mine that I use widely, and of course, I spoke about it in the book as well. Very often, people say to me, well, if the resources are disappearing, then let's wait until they do, and then we will be forced to transform. Why do we need to transform now? What is it? What's the urgency? Why do we need to start working on that? And I'm very happy to answer that with a quote by the most equipped person that I know, former oil minister of Saudi Arabia, Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani, who spoke about the fact that we cannot wait until we run out of resources. And his quote is very short but very powerful. He said, when he was asked, when will we see the end of the age of oil? He said, the Stone Age did not end because we ran out of stones. And I really love that. I think that summarizes this combination of, yes, we're running out of resources, but we can innovate our way ahead of the wave that can swallow us. And in that sense, I can also quote my own favorite quote in the book. I closed the book trying to make sense for myself where we've been. So this is what I said to the readers. The collapse of the linear throwaway economy is not a question of if, but of when. The change is coming, and the rapidly oscillating prices on everything from rice to gold are a first sign of the new reality. The question is, will you ride the high tides with mastery and purpose, or will you be swallowed by the waves that are unexpected and unnoticed until it's too late? And I'm happy to say that if the endless list of Overfished Ocean Strategy innovations is any education, we should make it into the new world just fine.
I find it shocking that people actually come up to you and ask you that question that you said that they ask you as far as why don't we just wait until we're depleted. That almost sounds like someone saying, I'll stop smoking once I actually have been diagnosed with lung cancer.
Well, that's the reality most smokers are in right now. And that's the reality most companies is in right now. I understand that it's difficult for companies. I understand that today most are in a cash situation where they just thinking about tomorrow, literally, or this quarter, or hopefully the end of 2014, but not how do I survive in the long run. And I'm happy to tell to them that moving towards a different strategic path, a resource intelligent path. This is what I call the Overfished Ocean Strategy, but you can call it whatever is most suitable for your company. That path brings fruits in the long run, but the good news is companies are able to capitalize it in the short run. It really creates an opportunity to save the cost and to really cut the cost today, while at the same time creating really untouchable revenues for tomorrow. So it's not only a long-term view, it's extremely short-term beneficial approach to strategy generation.
So Nadia, I think your book is going to create some paradigm shifts for corporations. And that brings us to our last question. And that's really, what's a book that you've read that has created a change or impacted you greatly or created a paradigm shift for you? And will you share that with our reader?
Well, I have a number of great loves in books, but in terms of paradigm shift, there are a few that come to mind. There's one very unknown book in the business communities I met. It's a book by founder and CEO of Visa International, Descartes. His name is D. Hawk, and he published a wonderful book in the 90s called The Birth of a Chaotic Age. He spoke about the merger between chaos and order and called this K-order. And his book is about how do we make sense of this new era and navigate it. And I really have to say he was ahead of his time. He wrote it in the 90s, and the real chaotic age for me started in the 2000s. So it's a wonderful, wonderful book. But there are a few others. Of course, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge is tremendous for any business owner. And then The Usual Suspect, Good to Great, is an amazing book for any business owner. And there are many others of that kind.
Well, thank you so much for referencing those. And Nadia, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listener to get more information on you and your book, Overfished Ocean Strategy?
Sure. So the book is available through any bookseller near you, including, of course, the giant online sellers such as Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Walmart for that matter. But you can also type Overfished Ocean Strategy in any search engine and you will come up to my website where you will also be able to find some free resources. I try to post TEDx talks, articles of mine, or any interviews I've done so that they become widely available and the ideas spread.
Nadia, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your creation, your book with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for hosting me.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like to get your hands on Overfished Ocean Strategy or any of the other resources mentioned by Nadia, just look at the show notes at the elpodcast.com. And remember, if there is a book you would love to hear reviewed by the author, please visit us on iTunes and leave us a review with the book title.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.